Madam Chair, and I want to begin by thanking the Honourable Lady for Pontypridd for bringing this debate forward, and I share her sincere and passionately held views on this issue. I've participated, as I know many members in this chamber have, on debates about access to cash on umpteen occasions, and to be honest, despite the huge level of consensus of what we need to do and what the problems are, I don't really see much change, but we all agree we need direct government intervention to halt the decline of cash, to protect access to cash for our communities. And I would like to echo the words of the honourable gentleman from Blackpool North. We need to just get on with it. The access to cash bill will be a very important piece of legislation, but we need to see it. COVID has placed our cash infrastructure in an even more precarious situation. What we need are clear protections for the future of cash payments, which is so important to so many people, as we've heard today. Those who simply don't have the option to pay by card, and those who simply want to pay by cash for budgeting or other reasons. As the Honourable Member for Inverclyde has reminded us, over 5 million people still rely on cash, and it's important that this is not forgotten. Cash transactions are and will remain for a considerable period of time to come very important for many people. And we've heard that from every single member today. Alongside all this is the loss of ATM free-to-use cash withdrawals. Now, we know that withdrawals from cash machines dropped significantly during the period of the height of the COVID pandemic. And my fear, and I know that this fear is shared around this chamber, is that this will feed the closure of free cash machines across our communities further to what was happening previously. Increasingly, ATMs are charging for access to cash, and that, I am afraid, is becoming normalised. Now, to help address this, I just want to make this point. To help address this, we need to make sure that banks pay their fair share for free access to cash to be provided to their customers. Now, banks have cutting the interchange fee has saved them £120 million, and the financial brunt is being borne by those who live in less affluent communities, which is a disgrace. The more affluent the area in which you live, the less likely you are required to pay to access your own cash through an ATM. That is unjustifiable by whatever measure you care to use. And another example of banks expecting others to pay for the so-called service that they want to provide. They don't properly remunerate post offices either for taking over basic banking, which they have abandoned in so many of our communities, and they don't properly remunerate the ATM providers either. There is a pattern emerging, and the banks need to explain themselves. It seems to me they are simply not fulfilling any social obligation or any duty of care to those that they expect to provide a service to, and to those who provide that service on their behalf. They must be held to their responsibilities if the access to cash bill is to make any real difference. Now, of course, it is welcome that the Financial Conduct Authority is to oversee access to cash and provide analysis of where and what needs to be done to support access to cash. But we know that this issue has become more critical as banks have left gaps in our provision. And as a result, our sub-postmasters need more financial support, and they need to stop being taken for granted by banks, given the essential role that they play in our communities, doing the job that banks are no longer interested in doing. And it's worth remembering that throughout the pandemic, post offices continued to serve our communities, and we relied upon them then as we do now. Many banks closed their doors during the pandemic. And as so much is expected of our post offices, we have sub-postmasters leaving the service because they are under such financial pressure. Many are simply shutting up shop, as it is much more challenging to make a living now. Sadly, post offices have been systematically run down over the years by successive governments. I remember in the 2000s when post offices were stripped of many of their functions by the previous Labour government. And prior to that, after that, there was an announcement in 2008 that 2,500 small and rural post offices would need to close, with Scotland being disproportionately hit with 600 closures. And 6 of those closures were in my constituency of North Ayrshire Arran. And since then, we've had so many bank closures that in my constituency we have 7 towns, Kilbirnie, Kilwinning, West Kilbride, Stevenston, Ardrossan, Dalry, Beath, with no bank at all. And now we have an access to cash crisis, with submasters expected to do so much of the heavy lifting, but not being properly paid to do so. The threats to our cash infrastructure, with the banks abandoning our towns, with sub-postmasters under intolerable financial pressure, with the provision of free access to cash becoming increasingly difficult to find, and with many being increasingly locked out of paying by cash, urgent action is needed if we are to protect our financial infrastructure and ensure that we have a society where financial inclusion matters. The situation is critical, and the contents of the Access to Cash Bill will be the crossroads where the government has a real opportunity to step in, to do something to stop this decline. And I think we can all agree what needs to be done. We need to start with the banks and the responsibility they have to communities and their consumers. But I look forward to the Minister today telling us more about the meaningful actions that he expects the Access to Cash Bill will provide, and when, perhaps, he will tell us we can get sight of this bill. The future of our financial infrastructure depends on this bill, so its contents will determine what the future of cash will be.